Welcome to App Stories. Today's show is brought to you by Pillow and Memberful. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Viticci. Hi, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing really well. You know what? After last week's Gone But Not Forgotten episode, we got some great feedback from Club Mac Stories Plus members in our Discord who really enjoyed the episode and started reminiscing about some of the third-party apps, which is third-party apps that are gone and not forgotten. And that's something that I actually considered for last week's episode when I was putting together those notes. And I knew, though, that we would have more than enough material just pulling from Apple's history. But people seem to want to talk about third-party apps, so I thought we would do that today.
Yes, and I think there's even there's a lot more choice.
It's a very deep well, isn't it?
It's nearly endless supply of old stuff that we once used or covered on Mac Stories or both. I don't think, well, it's not that I don't think, we will not be able to fit all of this in a single episode, but given that the format seems to work and people seems to like it, stay tuned for more episodes in this series. Where do I mean, we just have a collection of apps here. Where do you want to start? Just pick your favorite and go.
Well, I think last time in the last episode, we started with Warren Buffett's Paper Wizard, which is kind of a weird, quirky Apple app. And so I thought we would start with one of the weirder, quirkier apps from the earliest days of the App Store, which is I Am Rich.
Well, also consistent with the Warren Buffett theme,
It is. It's very. Warren probably is the guy who bought this app, right? Warren's like, yeah, I'm rich. This one's for me. And I have to give you a hard time, Federico. You did not. Well, I was going to say you did not write about this, but I think that this app actually predates Mac Stories. I think it's from 2008 when the App Store first opened its doors. And, it was, in some ways, I suppose it was brilliant, right? A total of 8 people bought this app.
8 people?
Yes, 8 people, nice. According to Wikipedia. And 6 of the sales were in the United States for $999.99. And then 2 Europeans purchased for 799 euros. Okay. Netting the developer is $5,600. This is Armin Heinrich. So Armin is the developer, and this was all according to the Los Angeles Times. This was an app that really didn't do anything other than tell people that you're rich. It had a glowing red gem. And
it was described as a work of art with no hidden function at all.
Yes. And so there was a button in this app, and when you press the button, you saw in big, large text, I am rich, I deserve it, I am good, healthy, and successful. And they spelled deserve wrong. I forgot the E at the end.
Incredible.
Which is perfect. It's like they didn't even really try very hard.
No.
It's only like 9 words, and they didn't even copy edit it. But yes, this was one of really the very first controversies, I think, in the App Store, in that there was a lot of talk about, should somebody be able to sell this kind of app? And, you got to think back to those days in the context, which is before the App Store opened its doors, there were a lot of people that thought that Apple would reject apps just for not being up to the quality standards of Apple software. Turns out, not so much. We immediately had a long list of, beer drinking simulators, fart apps, and I Am Rich. So, yes, early days of the App Store. Quite a time.
I wonder what happened to the developer. Like, what are they doing now?
That's a good question.
Did they ever make any other apps? What a story! I Am Rich is like one of the gems of the early days of the App Store, right? It's one of those stories that we all remember. I never covered it on Mac Stories because it was before my time, but I was familiar with it. Incredible. Let's see. There's plenty of things in this list, but I want to mention more of a category of apps, which really this sort of category of apps became possible right in the first few years of the site.
Okay.
And I'm talking about Dropbox-enabled text editors.
Ah, yes.
These apps kickstarted a whole generation of text editors and note-taking apps that would define, in many ways, the success of Markdown as a syntax for plain text. But even in a way, I think they also opened the door to the early ways to get work done on an iPhone and iPad. I believe that it all started with Elements, a text editor by Justin Williams. And Elements was one of the, I think actually the first app to take advantage of the, at the time, brand new Dropbox SDK.
Right.
It all started there. The whole idea was, and remember this, that iCloud Drive did not exist at the time. Like there was no, iCloud Drive was not a thing. And so Dropbox, which was already popular on desktop, making an SDK that would allow mobile apps to sync data back and forth with your computer so that you didn't have to use a cable. Because remember, in 2010, that was a thing, like syncing your phone with your computer via a cable, not even with a lightning cable, with the 30-pin dock connector and cable. That was a thing.
Through iTunes.
For iTunes. And having the Dropbox sync was a novelty and a revolution at the time. So I remember Elements as the app that started it all. Then I think there was also around the same time Plain Text by Jesse Grosjean, the same developer behind TaskPaper. And Plain Text was another Dropbox compatible text editor, from that generation. Yeah, and I believe Jesse was already working on TaskPaper and Lightroom, and Plain Text was like a separate product. This was also the same year, so 2010 was also the same year that we saw the first version of IA Writer, which I believe at the time was called Writer by IA. I had a slightly different name. But yeah, that was 2010. And then after Elements, Plain Text, IA Writer, I think it was also, it came, I want to say Writing Kit. And now, if I'm not mistaken, the developer of, this is a deep cut for you, John.
I remember all these apps, yes.
The developer of Writing Kit, which was an incredible text editor, is today the same developer of Good Links, which
really,
I think so. Let me see.
Yeah, I did not know that. While you're looking it up, I will just jump in here to say that the thing about that Dropbox API is that not only was it a way to sync across devices, but it was also a way to store files because, this was before iCloud Sync. This was before the Files app and access to the file system. The difficulty and the reason why these apps haven't really survived to this date is that the Dropbox API wasn't really meant to be a sync service, and it was very easy, if you weren't careful, to get your documents out of sync between devices where you might have made changes in one place or two places at once, and then they somehow got messed up in the process of trying to sync them back to Dropbox. So you had to be fairly careful about how you use these apps because it could cause trouble. And I think Dropbox then, too, ultimately changed their API at some point, which I think was something of the last blow for these apps because, we already by that time had iCloud Sync and the Files app. Then Dropbox changed things up, and we kind of went the other direction with text editors that work with iCloud and the file system instead of Dropbox.
Yeah, so I was mistaken about Writing Kit. The developer of Good Links obviously was the developer of OneWriter, which is another text editor.
Oh, right. That's a very good app.
That was also a very good app, but that came later. Still
around.
I do believe that Writing Kit was made by someone who still has apps on the App Store today, but can't think of the name right now.
Okay.
I also wanted to mention, obviously, that whole generation of the early text editors. Byword was also one of the apps that was very popular at the time. I
Also
remember
still around.
Byword.
Yeah, pretty
Is it
sure it is.
around? Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's around. It's been a few years, I think, since I last saw an update, though.
No, that's true.
Yeah. At the time, I remember having this setup where I was using Elements with Dropbox Sync on my iPhone and then on the iPad. And on the Mac, I had MV Alt by Brett Terpstra
Right.
syncing up with the same Dropbox folder. And I remember thinking, oh, this is incredible. Like the same folder syncing everywhere. Now, obviously, in hindsight, all of this sounds obvious, but at the time, it was revolutionary.
Yeah, it really was. And it really did drive more adoption of plain text editors because it was fast and it was easy to sync. So it really did help push Markdown forward. I mean, it's not like Markdown was invented at that time, but I think it really got a boost at the time that the iPad and the iPhone and the app stores were, just starting out. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Pillow. More and more studies show that getting a great night's sleep can improve your health and well-being. Pillow is a simple app that can help you become more aware of your sleep patterns so you can make informed decisions that will help you get a better night's sleep. All you need to do is wear your Apple Watch when you go to bed. Pillow will track and analyze your sleep automatically and give you a full report in the morning. If you want to use Pillow with just an iPhone or iPad, you can do that too with the press of a button before going to sleep. If you have an Apple Watch, you can also get important information about your heart rate trends, variability, heart rate dip, blood oxygen levels, and a whole lot more. You can even record sounds that happen during the night, like sleep talking, sleep apnea, snoring, and other noises that might be affecting your sleep. If you have an Apple Watch that's a Series 6 or newer, Pillow will also display information about the intensity of those sounds during each sleep session and give you a report and rating in the morning. Another valuable aspect of Pillow is helping you make informed decisions to improve your sleep. Pillow comes with a dedicated section where you can discover trends, get personalized insights, sleep tips, and easily compare your sleep metrics to your weight, steps, caffeine consumption, and other health metrics. If you want to wind down and relax before going to bed, you can do that too by listening to Pillow's expanding collection of sleep aid sounds, guided meditations, bedtime stories, and music produced specifically for sleep. If you have the opportunity to take a nap, Pillow even has a power nap mode, which can help you get some rest so you're focused and creative all day long. Pillow can also wake you up at the lightest possible sleep stage with your iPhone, Apple Watch, or iPad. And starting with watchOS 6, Pillow's battery consumption is minimal too. Last but not least, Pillow is very privacy-minded. All of your sleep and audio data is encrypted and stored on your device and in your iCloud storage account using end-to-end encryption. You don't need to register for an account to use Pillow either. You can use it anonymously, and it doesn't collect or send your personal data anywhere else. Pillow is free to download from the App Store and comes with a set of great features that you can use for free every single day. If you want to try Pillow's premium features, there's also an option to start a 7-day free trial. Just visit pillow.app to get started today. Again, that URL to check out Pillow is pillow.app. Our thanks to Pillow for their support of the show. All right, Federico, let's see. Where do we want to go next? I think, given the current news, we should talk about some Twitter apps. And in particular, I want to talk about two. There are a million different Twitter clients that have come and gone, but Tweety, of course, was the original great Twitter client. And I think really in the end of the day had an awful lot to do with Twitter's success because this was an app built in a period where building this kind of app wasn't easy. What Tweety figured out, and this was by Lauren Brichter, was a way to use the cells of these UI table views to continuously load tweets into the cells, which sounds obvious, but was very, very hard at the time because the internet connections were a lot slower. The processors on the iPhone were a lot slower too. And as a result, it was very hard to dynamically load data off of the web into an app without it crawling and stuttering to a crawl. And Lauren did an amazing job with that. The app was just beautifully designed. Of course, it was where pull to refresh was invented. That was came first with
Yep.
Tweety. It was not an Apple thing. Apple kind of adopted it later. And then ultimately, Tweety, not long after it got its Mac app, was purchased by Twitter itself and became the official Twitter client. Because at the time, Twitter still was just, as a company, all they had was the web app.
Yeah. And Tweety had so many innovations at the time. I mean, besides the fact that pull to refresh was like truly a once in a lifetime sort of a UI interaction invention from a
Right.
single person. There was a time I believe that Lauren was actually regretting inventing pull to refresh because of like how it was kind of like a precursor to doom scrolling and sort of
Yes.
this behavior that truly changed a generation, just scrolling with your thumb and refresh to see new content. But then I think Lauren got a patent for it. And then Apple came up with their own version. Now pull to refresh is like a standard iOS UI control. But Tweety has so many other design touches like the inline actions, how fluid the UI was. And then, of course, there was the Twitter for iPad, which was the evolution of Tweety after it became the official Twitter client. Lauren went to work at Twitter and made Twitter for iPad. And to this day, I truly believe that Twitter for iPad was one of the most innovative, beautifully designed iPad apps with the sliding panels and the nested navigation that was really taking advantage of the iPad's display. Again, we're talking 2010. And 2010, as you will see from the apps that we're going to mention here, between 2010 and 2012 to early 2013, an incredible era for indie apps on the App Store. And Twitter for iPad was one of them. There was also, of course, a collection, like a whole a vast and deep collection of Twitter clients that we can mention. I remember. I mean, obviously, Twitterific is still with us today, but there's a long, deep catalog of Twitter clients that just are gone, but as the episode says, not forgotten. For example, Icebird. Icebird, really polished, good-looking Twitter client.
I don't know that one.
Oh, Icebird was very nice. You had Birdhouse. Birdhouse
Yes.
was another Twitter app, but for storing drafts of your tweets and saving them for later. More general purpose editors, clients included Twitter Later and then Twitter Later New that came later.
All right.
Echophone, and I think Echophone may still be available today.
Yeah, Echophone got its start. I mean, it was even like a BlackBerry app, I think, at one point.
Yeah, I
it
think
was
so.
on everything. It was on all sorts of platforms.
I think so. And the one that I really liked, and it was kind of like the one for power users at the time, Osphora. Do you remember
right.
Osphora?
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
And
you
there
were
was
still
also-
using that, I think, when I got to know you, or at least occasionally
I
using it.
was really? I was still using
think.
Osphora?
Maybe not. Maybe you just told me about it. But yeah, I remember that one for sure. I never used it myself, but I know you did.
Yeah, and then let's see. There was 2010, Osphora, a new take on Tweety. There was an article on Mac Stories. And then came Osphora HD on the iPad. And then they made in 2012, I think they made Osphora for Mac. Yeah, that was a great time, a really great time for Twitter clients. And yes, Osphora HD, I did the review in July 2010, had also the sort of the split screen layout on the iPad to take advantage of the bigger screen. Yeah, that was good. I gotta tell you, John, I remembered who I was thinking of for
okay.
So the developer of Writing Kit is the same developer of the excellent pinboard client Pins. We covered Pins. So,
Yeah,
and I'm
I
sorry
didn't
if I'm
realize that.
getting your name wrong. An Kwang Du. Yeah, now he's the developer of Pins for Pinboard and used to make Writing Kit. And Writing Kit was for several months my go-to editor for publishing articles on Mac Stories. I remember using Writing Kit in 2011, 2012. Now, speaking of Pinboard, there's an app that I want to mention, and the app is Pinbook, I think.
Right.
It was a really elegant and well-designed client for Pinboard on your iPhone. Had this brown UI, and was one of the apps that like allowed you to set things for read later. You could customize the tags, add a share extension, had a URL scheme that allowed you to like add links from your clipboard using Launch Center Pro. Like that was good. That was good at the time using Pinbook. But I gotta tell you, like as an aside, what happened to Pinboard in general?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's still around, obviously, but
no. I have a first-hand experience with this that goes back to like a week ago, actually.
Okay, what?
So in my journey to find the ideal read later tool for me, I thought, well, what if I'm thinking outside the box? What if I sign up for Pinboard again, and what if I use an excellent Pins app and take advantage of Pins search operators and ability to create smart lists and smart views in the app. And Pins is really an incredible client for Pinboard. Super modern. You can use it on your iPhone and iPad. It's great. But I signed up for Pinboard. Well, more like I reactivate my account. I set everything to private. I delete all of my previous bookmarks and I pay for the archival account. Right? On Pinboard, you can pay an extra to make sure that all the bookmarks you save are also cached for offline future usage. It's called like the archival account option. So I paid for that. And I started saving some articles for read later. And I noticed that every time I click on the cached version, there's a button on the Pinboard website where you can click and, be taken to the offline version stored for the future. It gives me a 404, like URL not found. I'm like, interesting. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe I guess I gotta press the button that says recrawl web page. And so basically it's been 2 weeks since I paid for Pinboard again. The archival feature is not working. I tried reaching out to the Pinboard developer, be like, hey, I signed up for this and I paid, but it never worked. I tried talking to a bunch of people, including Anne, behind the scenes, be like, hey, do you know anything about Pinboard? Like, if you pay for Pinboard, does the feature you're paying for still work?
Yeah.
And basically, it seems like the Pinboard developer took like a break from social media last year and disappeared. And basically, no one knows how to get in touch with them in any way.
Great.
And so, great. Now I'm wondering, what should I do with this archival account that I paid for? But anyway, all that to say, Pinboard used to be very popular back in the day. Now we have plenty of other options when it comes to bookmarking and reading things for later.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that what Pinboard as a service had in common with Twitter is that with an open API, they became great playgrounds for developers to kind of test out the waters for different kinds of UIs on the iPhone and the iPad. And that's one reason I think we got so many apps with both of those services, and maybe not so much anymore. I guess, there's people have moved on to different categories, obviously, and Twitter has had its rocky relationship for many, many years now, even pre-Elon Musk, with third-party developers. So that's kind of made that area not quite as vibrant as it has been, although, until very recently, it had kind of had a resurgence. So who knows where things are going there. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Memberful. Memberful is the easiest way to sell memberships to your audience, and it's used by the biggest creators on the web. Memberful handles all of the hard stuff so you can focus on what you do best while earning revenue quickly. If you're looking to add membership to your existing business, you want a solution that works with your existing technology, so you can launch a new revenue stream without rebuilding your entire tech stack. That's what we did in 2015 when we started Club Mac Stories. Memberful was the perfect choice because it already integrated with the services we used then, and today it integrates with even more things that we're using. It's grown with us, which has been fantastic. Things like MailChimp, Discord, Stripe, and a whole lot more are all things that we use with the club and that work with Memberful. There are a ton of tools that Memberful works with, things like WordPress, MailChimp, Discord, and a lot more. It also maintains a fully featured GraphQL API, webhooks, and OAuth single sign-on to make it easy to integrate seamlessly with any stack. There's a WordPress plugin, too, to add membership and content restriction to your website. And you can use a custom domain name, which is something that we do, so that everything is fully branded under your name. Plus, it connects directly with Stripe for secure payments and can handle your transactional emails. Memberful has everything you need to start a membership program, including custom branding, gift subscriptions, Apple Pay, free and paid trials, private podcasts, in-house newsletters, referrals, and a lot more. Get started today for free with no credit card required by visiting memberful.com/appstories. Again, that URL to get started with Memberful is memberful.com/appstories. Our thanks to Memberful for their support of the show. Federico, I think one category that maybe we should close this episode out with is mail clients, because there's a lot here, right? And this is going to take us a little while to do, and we've got enough here that we should probably do yet another episode, which may not be until next year at this point. But, people just have to hold tight and wait, I guess. But I want to start with, let's see, where am I going to start? I think I'm going to start with one that a lot of people will remember, which is Mailbox, which ultimately got purchased by Dropbox itself and then shut down almost immediately, if I remember right. I mean, it wasn't very long before Dropbox shut that down. I suppose maybe it was more of an acqui-hire thing where they were trying to get the engineering talent, or maybe it was that some of those features got built into Dropbox Paper and those other online tools that Dropbox has now. But Mailbox was a fantastic app.
Yeah, and Mailbox, besides the fact that, so there's a couple of things to remember about Mailbox. First, it was the first app, or one of the very first apps that, anyway, it popularized the idea of a waiting queue to start using an app. You had to sign up and wait in a virtual line to be granted access to Mailbox. And it was Gmail only. But one of the things that Mailbox pioneered, besides the waiting queue, was to treat your email inbox more like a task manager. And that was the whole idea behind marking messages as done, and obviously it was very beautifully designed, fast search, and it was very much designed for the philosophy of Inbox Zero. The other thing that Mailbox did, and that I know our friend Mike Hurley likes to point out every single time,
he does.
A feature that I don't think it's ever been replicated anywhere else. Mailbox allowed you to manually sort your messages in your inbox with drag and drop. So if you didn't want to set something aside for later, which, by the way, Mailbox was the first app to also invent the idea of snoozing a message for later. Mm-hmm. But if you didn't want to snooze that, if you didn't want to archive that or mark that as done, you could just use drag and drop to rearrange visually in the vertical hierarchy of your inbox to bring a message in the top spot or second spot from the top and see it right away. And that feature, a relatively simple feature, seems like, it looks like it was never done again by anybody else.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I think, I suppose that's because email is designed to very much be a chronological thing. But I think that that's a great feature because it really allows you to, lets you treat email the way a lot of people treat it, which is as a task management system. And being able to manually drag your tasks around is key to any kind of task management system. So I'm surprised it hasn't come back. Federico, the other app that I think about a lot when I think about great past mail clients is Sparrow. Because,
yes. Okay.
And this one's very appropriate
also
to talk
from 2010.
About. Yes. And another one that very much took its cues, I think, from Tweety, because I have a I have a screenshot here of your inbox from, I guess, 2010 in Sparrow. And it was very much that kind of iPhone single column with the icons down the left
Mm-hmm.
sidebar showing you various actions you can take, starring, forwarding, deleting, that sort of thing. And it's got that old Mac Stories sweet, sweet logo there, the kind of
Yes.
chrome M. And you sitting up, the very young Federico at the top of the left side rail, and you've got some great emails here about jailbreaking iOS 4. What
Damn.
else is in here? Something from Discus. It's pretty good. This is something from something from Ale, who used to be our
Yeah.
developer, and yeah, it was a really neat app because it I guess what it did for email is a lot like what Tweety did for Twitter. It just made it a really easy one-handed experience, putting all the common controls really within easy
Yeah.
reach for both viewing and managing your email.
Yeah, and yes, absolutely. And I think that this Tweety-like design for a few years at the time, like used to, it became a trend
Yeah, it
in
really
Mac
did.
software. I want to say that Sparrow pioneered this idea of like, well, what if we just implemented the Tweety-like sidebar? Because that UI element, the Tweety-like sidebar, was a novel type of design on macOS, right? macOS didn't have that kind of sidebar. That was a mobile sidebar, sort of reimagined for the Mac, which was something that Lauren did with Tweety for Mac. And Sparrow was like, well, what if we take the Tweety approach and we use it for something else as a navigational element? Later, if I'm not mistaken, I think one of the first versions of Reader for Mac, Reader, the app by Silvio
Yeah.
Rizzi, I believe the first version of Reader for Mac was based on the same design, but with the dark sidebar on
I
the left
think
side.
you're right. Yeah. And all that's very custom. I mean, that's not like a built-in Apple
No.
control that existed at the time.
Did I imagine this of Reader having that design? Maybe I did. Well, I have this memory of Reader for Mac having like a minimized mode.
It may
for the
be that. It may be
sidebar.
just a collapsed sidebar for either the
col-
Mac or for the iPad that you're thinking of. I don't know. I do remember the same kind of thing with the star as being kind of the anchor of the sidebar.
Yes, that's what I remember.
Yeah.
And maybe there was but for sure, like there were plenty of other apps at the time there that were using like the Tweety-like sidebar. It was a thing for a while in macOS 10 land. A decade ago, or more, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's still, there's variants on it. I mean, it's evolved over time, but we still have that kind of thing available now. There are plenty of different apps where you can, it's still true in Twitter clients on the Mac.
Oh no, I was right. I found the picture.
Oh,
I was
good,
right.
good.
Yes.
Of course you were. But Tweetbot does that, for instance, too, right? I mean, you can expand and collapse the sidebar in Tweetbot on the Mac and see bigger or smaller icons. I don't know. There are a bunch of things that do that now.
I'm sending you a link so you can take a look at these screenshots. They are pretty incredible.
Is this from one of your old stories?
Yes, it's one of my old everything from that era you can find in my old articles, including look at those sponsors that I used to sell myself on the old version. Wow, that was a long time ago, and I used to report about Steve Jobs replying to emails from people. Man.
Oh yeah.
That was an era for sure.
Oh boy. There's a link in here. There's a link in here to Fork Bomber.
And look at the doc. Look at the doc when you scroll toward the bottom of the article. So in the doc, you can see Finder, Transmit, iTunes 10, Spotify. The purple one is the Tweety icon. What's that? iChat, CyberDuck. That's an early version of OmniFocus 2. Mailplane.
Yeah,
Yojimbo. Oh my God, Yojimbo.
Yeah. Wow.
What's the rocket?
I was going to say, what's the rocket with the red wings? I forget what that is.
I don't know what it is.
It looks
then we
like
have
a storage app.
Devonthink, Chrome, Reader, and Stacks. And then the trash. Yeah.
Wow.
For
times.
email clients, did we mention Dispatch?
Not yet. Yeah, that's a good example, because that's an early example of automation on the.
I wanted to
iOS.
mention Dispatch. So Dispatch, made by See, wow, why do I know all these things? I guess it's been my
This
job
is,
forever.
this is what
now.
we know.
This is just
This
the
is what
things
we
know.
do.
Dispatch, made by the same people behind the excellent and still ongoing utility Due. You may know Due,
Yep.
the reminder app that sends you nagging notifications for things. Dispatch was an email client designed for automation. And this was automation before workflow and automation before shortcuts. We're talking 2013, I want to say. And of course, at the time, automation was all about URL schemes, NX callback URL. And Dispatch was an email client that the main idea was, well, what if dealing with your email messages was as easy as sending them to other apps? And that was done through a custom share sheet based on URL schemes, based on hard-coded integrations with third-party apps. And it was the time of 2012 and 2013 was the time when utilities like Launch Center Pro and Drafts really started taking off. I mean, it's why we're celebrating 10 years of Drafts in 2022.
Right.
That's the era. That's when, 4 years into the App Store and 2 years into the iPad, developers started asking, well, but what if we want to get work done on these devices? What's a way that we can simplify and speed things up in a way that's reminiscent of macOS? URL schemes at the time were the only technologies to speed things up a little bit more. That's why Greg Pierce of Drafts also invented the X-callback URL protocol. And Dispatch was the logical conclusion of that idea, but for an email client. And it was very good for a while.
Remember how many apps in this era around 2013 had these custom share sheets before Apple created one?
Oh,
man.
man.
And they were not easy to build, is my understanding. And then a lot of apps that built them then had this technical debt that they stuck with them
for
beyond,
a while. Yes.
Yeah, for a long time after Apple came up with their own. And I kind of get it, but this was really a way to create a UI for URL schemes more than anything else originally. And then Apple actually made extension points for creating a share sheet that hooked into the system more directly. And it was a long time before these custom share sheets were completely gone. Another one that I remember a lot is from the original version of Unread. Remember, for the RSF client? It had its own share sheet too, which was really looked great, and I think came out right before Apple did theirs. And then now it's using a standard share sheet at this point. But it was one of these apps that had their very own for a while.
Yeah. Wow. All right, we can probably wrap it up here, John, and I guess we'll come back in 2023 with more gone but not forgotten third-party apps.
Yeah, we definitely have to do that. We've got a long list. I think this has been kind of fun. It's interesting to me always to look back at these things, not just as kind of a curiosity of looking in the museum of app culture, but also to see where things have been, because it really gives us an idea of why things are the way they are today in a lot of situations, right?
Yes.
And plus some good funny stories of the old days of Mac stories too. So those are always enjoyable as well. All right, Ticci. That's it for today. I want to thank our two sponsors for this episode. That's Pillow and Memberful. You can find the two of us over at macstories.net. Federico and I are both on Twitter and Instagram too. Federico is at Viticci, that's VITICCI, and I'm at John Voorhees, JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.